Hey, good day, everybody. Truth Survives 411 here, checking in with you guys again. And wanted to kind of talk a little bit about in this video around the question that perhaps comes up for all of us at times, and that is what caused me to be an ex-JW? What caused me to leave the organization? What put me on this channel? And of course, I'm sure many of us have similar experiences or comments on it, and I could go in a lot of different directions, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible, not trying to cover off on everything, but maybe just some of the main highlights that speak to why I'm in this place today, as having left something that was a part of my identity for over a quarter century to be at this point right now. So for me, there's probably maybe 4 or 5 things, quite frankly, that really just stuck out. And it was actually things that was mentioned in my letter of disassociation that I wrote to my body of elders at the time. But in no particular order, the first thing would be around the organization focusing, in my view, heavily on financial matters. That was something that just seemed to be more and more prominent as a JW, let alone as a JW serving in an appointed capacity as an elder. That just started to stick out for me. I mentioned in the earlier video, my first brush with the financial arm of the organization to me in terms of their focus was right around 1990 or so, when they mentioned a donation arrangement was coming into the US as opposed to charging for literature a specific dollar amount or requested contribution. But that was just one thing. And of course, I didn't think a whole lot about it as I progressed in time in the organization. But as time goes on and you're looking at more and more letters that are focused on contributions, new building projects here and there, either locally or at the assembly hall level or even at the organizational level, branch facilities, etc. All these upgrades, and yet we're constantly hearing we're in the last of the last days. The organization is preparing for the new world. We don't need to focus on, building up anything financially in Satan's system. Use your unrighteous riches, as it were, right? Unrighteous riches to support kingdom interests. And yet, while the rank and file is expected to make that sacrifice, what you see in the organization tended to be a little bit different. Some of you may be familiar with, in the U.S., the leasing program for the circuit or traveling overseers. Every 2 to 3 years, they get a new leased vehicle. But yet, if you're an individual publisher and you buy a new car every 5 years, folks are going to look at you and say, you're materialistic. I can't help but laugh about it now, because it was just so hypocritical and so backwards. But yet you would psychologically explain it away, because you say, well, no, they're focused on Jehovah's work and caring for the flock, so it's no problem that the circuit overseer gets new wheels every 2 to 3 years, and at the same time, Sister Faithful here, she's on the bus, or in some jalopy that she's rolling around in. But just the heavy emphasis on financial matters, what I saw happen at the circuit level, which I'll talk about in another video, in terms of how contributions were handled. Other things that I've seen happen at the circuit level when it comes to funds, just didn't look good. More correspondence I was managing as an elder was around finances than things that really matter to spirituality and growing the congregation, in my view. So that would be one thing. Just the overall financial arm of the organization just grew and grew and grew, to my dismay, quite frankly. Second thing that largely played a role in me exiting from the organization was really around this matter of child abuse handling, pedophile issues, as we know has been talked about ad nauseum amongst the ex-JW community, and of course even inside some talk about it. But I never was squarely up against that specific issue in my time in the organization. I had one scenario where there was a potential question, accusation, and we had to do the fire drill in terms of contacting the branch and legal department and making sure that, again, yes, that we were not to contact law enforcement until we spoke to the branch first and gave them the full rundown. So I did have that experience at least one time to my recollection as an elder, but some of the language and the correspondence as to how they wanted you to deal with that, again, putting the heavy emphasis on talking to the branch first. Again, no mention of notifying the congregation or even individuals in the congregation where someone might be in the congregation that was suspect of this type of activity. Just really struck me. There was one specific media case that came out, I don't know what year it was now, but it was around a gentleman named Jesus Cano. If you look it up, especially in the United States, you may recall, this person was a Bethelite. And this fool was caught at, I want to say, an airport. Might have been O'Hare Airport, but he was caught at the airport after having propositioned young people for the purpose of, trying to have sex with them. And this was a person that was a Bethelite, had been there a long time. And it really brought a lot of embarrassment, of course, to the organization for those that found out about it. I'll never forget even the comment that was made by J.R. Brown. Many people know him to be the public relations arm of Jehovah's Witnesses right now. And he having to comment to the media about this person who, of course, they subsequently disfellowshipped and all this kind of thing. But it was kind of like, damage control. But just that whole scenario to have a Bethelite at Bethel, and yet in his spare time, this guy was driving around propositioning young boys in upstate New York, and apparently, like I said, had boarded a plane to be here at O'Hare in the Chicago area to actually meet up with someone until he was arrested. But that whole thing just very troubling. So that was the second thing, handling child abuse issues. The third thing I would say was really just around the blood issue. Yeah, the blood issue and how the organization really looks at that just became increasingly something that I started to question. The reason being is because you may recall this watchtower that came out, I want to say, was it June of 2004 or something like that, where they kind of talked a little bit more about this issue of fractions and those types of things and opened it up for individual publishers to take them if their conscience allowed, and came up with all of these scriptures that explain why they think this is okay. That for me was very troubling, because what I couldn't get out of my head was, okay, so here's where we are, this progressive new light when it comes to blood management and issues like this for Jehovah's Witnesses or Jehovah's people. But what about those that before the article came out, this new light, had made a decision to not take anything, blood, let alone any fractions or any of the four major components? What about those individuals that stood up for what they believed to be Jehovah's direction at that time and lost their lives because of it? Where's the accountability? Where's the responsibility on the part of the organization? That was something that really just stuck with me, because I started to reflect and think back on all the people I visited in the hospital as a member of the patient visitation group, if you will, to check in on friends that are about to have surgery and this type of thing, and yet pray with them and encourage them to stand up for Jehovah's thinking on blood matters. Very dangerous thing. And that started to really stick out for me as time went on. That's three things. So the financial arm of the organization continued to grow. The child abuse handling and pedophilia issues, that was a concern. The blood-related management issues in the organization, that was a big one. And then fourthly, I would say the organization just seeming to move further and further away from Jesus Christ. From Jesus Christ. I mean, I can still picture in my mind right now a magazine that some of you may be familiar with that came out, I want to say, was it April of 2013? I want to say the April study edition, 2013. And there was an article in there about, you know, the organization, governing body, whatever it was. But there was a picture. I don't know which one it was because I don't have a ton of the literature around and I don't really look into it and dig in like many of you do. And I admire you for your courage and comfort level in doing so. But frankly, I kind of tend to stay away from it at this point. But there was a picture in that April 2013 Watchtower study edition where it was showing God's organization, both heavenly and earthly. And it started out, of course, in heaven with Jehovah here, you know, represented. But then it comes in to the spiritual / earthly element. And then you see the governing body, right, in their little office chairs, if you will. And then it moves progressively down to the elders, right, and then the local congregation. And yet, what I noticed was very interesting to me was as it went further down, the quality of the materials that these individuals lived and sat in declined significantly, meaning the governing body was kind of like in, you know, you might say an executive room with these wonderful, big, beautiful chairs and these awesome looking desks. And then the elders at the district or circuit level, supposedly, were in something a little bit less than that. And then the local elders were basically, you know, on school crates or something like that. I just thought that was very cheesy, very interesting to me. But I was like, okay, is this how we're viewed as local elders in the local congregations on the front lines? Is this how they're viewed? Well, what does that say about those that produce the material, the governing body and writing committee, etc.? But then also noticeably absent when referring to God's complete organization, heavenly down to earthly, noticeably absent was Jesus Christ. And that, frankly, friends, that floored me. That floored me. I couldn't believe it. I did a double take. I did a triple take. I prayed about it. I'm like, where is Jesus? We're supposed to be followers of Christ, are we not? He's the head of the congregation, so we're told. But he was nowhere represented in the picture. I even shared that with a fellow elder friend of mine at the time. And, you know, he had all kinds of explanations as to why he wasn't there and that the picture wasn't meant to represent, you know, that part of the organization. I said, okay, well, what part is it representing? Well, it's representing just the earthly part. I said, okay, well, that's fine. If that's true, well, then why did they represent Jehovah in the picture? See, it went Jehovah, governing body. Jehovah, governing body, then, you know, traveling elders, and then local. Very interesting. That, for me, was huge. Because that basically told me that now these men have essentially carved Jesus pretty much out of the picture when it comes to leading the congregation, the organization. And if you're not following Jesus at that point, well, then what are you doing? Are you saying that you have a direct line to God now when the Bible tends to say the exact opposite? It says that Christ is a mediator between God and men. That includes those that supposedly are anointed by God as his sons. So that was powerful. So that's four things right there. Again, the minimization of Jesus is something that I saw that just really did not add up for me at all as one considered to be a spiritually older man. That didn't line up. So those are just 4 things. I'm sure there's more that I could get into. And of course, even as it relates to, my personal marital situation, how that was handled in terms of some of the things that were going on that led to the termination of my marriage, that all reflected men, being the ones dominating the situation as opposed to God as well, in my view. But those are some of the things that basically brought me out. And from you all's perspective, maybe you can comment on that or share your thoughts. But those were the big 4 for me. Financial arm, growing and growing. Child abuse, pedophilia, how they were handling that. The blood issue, the backpedaling right around the mid-2000s and not really taking accountability for decisions prior. Also, again, the minimization of Jesus Christ in the eyes of the organization and leadership. Those were 4 huge things for me that said, you know what, I think I need to make some changes here. And so that's what brought me out. But yeah, feel free to comment. Let me know what you think in terms of what maybe did it for you, or if you have any other comments to share. But just wanted to put that out there in terms of what did it for me. Thanks.